What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and we've got a pretty interesting deck for you today, a deck that I think is not getting enough love in the meta. I had done a video on this particular deck list prior to the set coming out, prior to all the cards being announced, and they announced some cards that I think really made a pretty big difference in how the deck could potentially be played since then, so I have tweaked it quite a bit. There was also a card that I think I just kind of overlooked as being potentially really good because not a lot of people were talking about it, but I think the card is well worth it. That being said, as always, big shout out to Patreon for making these giveaways on the channel possible and just continuing to support me as a creator. You guys are the real MVPs making this all possible. That being said, without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Ruby Steel Pirates. So the first card we're going to be playing is not going to be a pirate at all, but is incredibly relevant to the deck, and that is going to be 4 Mickey Mouse Food Fight Defender, a 1-cost inkable 1/2 character questing for 1 with resist 1, so he is a great first turn play against something like Steel Song because he isn't going to die to a Strength of the Raging Fire with 2 characters on board or a Let the Storm Rage on in the early game. Not where you want to be against Steel Song, but great into other decks. We are on 4 Captain Hook Forceful Duelist, a 1-cost inkable character, 1/2 stat line questing for 1, but he has Challenger 2, so he is a 3/2 when he punches in, dealing with a lot of those bodyguards, as well as being able to be a great threat for any kind of aggro deck you may be playing against. Does also trade with Mim, Fox, and Snake. Another great option to trade with Mim, Fox, and Snake is going to be Moana Self-Taught Sailor, a 1-cost inkable character, 3/2 stat line questing for 1 with the ability Learning the Ropes. This character can't challenge unless you have a captain character in play. I honestly don't think that ability is really that much of a drawback. She is a great way to clog up the board in the early game. She's kind of better than Hook in a way. She can't challenge in, but on your opponent's turn she does have that 3 attack. If you have a captain character in play, obviously that changes and she can challenge in, but if you just start questing with her, like I think if they had made her can't challenge and can't quest, card would have been bad, but the fact that you can still quest with her, get her exerted, and make her a potential target for your opponent is kind of crazy, because your opponent's probably going to have a lot of stuff in that early game that is either like a 1/4 and isn't going to trade into Moana, or is potentially something that's going to trade straight up because it's only going to have 3 defense. Your other great turn 1 play into something like Steel Song is going to be Jolly Roger. We're on 4 of these, a 1-cost uninkable location, 2 to move in, 5 willpower. Characters gain rush while they're here, which is fantastic. Giving characters rush is amazing. 2 to move in obviously hurts it and only has 5 willpower. However, your pirate characters can move here for free, so you play this turn 1 against Steel Song. Turn 2, you're ready to potentially develop 2 1-cost pirate characters and blast away, or even 1-drop pirate character and some like Mickey. Next up in the 2-drop slot, we've seen a card we've seen getting a lot of love recently, and a card I always thought was great ever since it first came out. I should have, when I was building those original deck lists with Doc, I should have bought foil ones when they were like $1, because now it's like I think a $20 cold foil or something, which is crazy. But he is a 2-cost uninkable character, 1/3 stat line questing for 1, and his ability is fantastic because there's many instances with this deck where you're going to potentially be in a position where your hand is empty, and when you play this character you may discard your hand to draw 2 cards, so you don't have to have a hand to discard a hand, but you can potentially just play a 2-cost 1/3 character and draw 2. And this deck has a lot of heavy hitters already, so you're not so much worried about having another attacker. Next up in the 2-cost slot, we are on 2 Mr. Smee Steadfast Mate, a 2-cost uninkable 3/2 stat line questing for 1. Another great way to be punchy against your opponent, and during your turn this character gains evasive, so if they're not dealing with him, he is potentially a good way to deal with Diablos and some of those other evasive threats in the meta. Has a favorable trade into Tinkerbell if your opponent's playing Tinkerbell. This is a card we had 3 of in the original list, then we made a list with 4, and then we ended up going back to 3. The card is very, very good. It's a super good quester, but there are some matchups where it just feels bad with the 2 willpower and the fact that it is uninkable. If you're playing into something like Steel Song, or really anything playing Steel that's going to be able to deal direct damage, or even into something like Ruby Amethyst, who may be playing Brawl, Wendy Darling is just going to come out and die, and she is going to be uninkable, so you can't ink her instead. She is a 2-cost uninkable character, 1/2 stat line questing for 1 with evasive, and while you have another pirate character in play, she's going to get +1 attack and +1 lore, so if you're not playing into the things that I was just talking about, she's incredible because she's going to be evasive, she's going to quest for 2, and she's a 2/2 for 2, which is mental. But if you're playing into any of that direct removal, she is going to be hard to keep on the board. Next up in the 2-cost slot, we are on 4 Mr. Smee Bumbling Mate, a 2-cost unequal character. I've said it once, I'll say it 100 times. One of the best cards in the game. He is a 3/3 stat line questing for 2. 2 cost, 3/3 stat line, questing for 2. Absolutely crazy. Does he have a negative ability? Yes. Is it ever going to affect you in this deck? It is very unlikely. And that is at the end of your turn, if this character is exerted and you don't have a captain character in play, deal 1 damage to this character. We have Wendy Darling as a captain. We have Captain Hook as a captain in the early game. And then we have more captains as we go further into the late game, particularly on 3. We have several shift options for captain. Last up in the 2-drop slot is going to be 3 Skull Rock, a 2 cost inkable location, 1 to move in, 6 willpower, 2 abilities. Characters get +1 strength while they're here, which is fantastic. All of a sudden your Captain Hook is taking out Daisy Ducks and stuff like that, so that's great. And you could play it on turn 2 if you wanted, but playing it on turn 3 and getting something inside of it is really where it's going to shine. But Skull Rock is an excellent location. We were on way more locations when we had a little bit of a different build, but we changed a lot of things. We cut a lot of the locations down to just Skull Rock and Jolly Roger, but Skull Rock, very good. Particularly for pirates. For anything else, it's borderline unplayable. Next up in the 3 cost slot, we are on 2 Pete Games Referee, a 3 cost inkable character, 3/3 stat line, questing for 1. Notably not a pirate and not an aggressive quester, but is a card that you're going to want to have in those matchups where you're playing against something like Be Prepared, because Pete is going to prevent your opponent from playing actions. He is also very good in that Steel Song matchup, as he is able to shut your opponent's actions off, prevent them from dealing direct damage, and potentially giving you an opportunity to close out the game. But 3 cost inkable, 3/3 stat line, questing for 1, and when you play him, your opponent can't play any actions till your next turn. This is a card I shamefully overlooked when I first built the pirate deck, and that is going to be for Pete Freebooter. I initially tested this card in the Pirates build at a 2 of, then I ended up going up to a 3 of because it was really good. I ended up going to a 4 of. It is just a super good way to clear the board, particularly if you have a Jolly Roger on the board or in your hand. It is a card. Some decks will struggle to remove locations, or they will just not put as much value on something like Jolly Roger because it's not gaining you lore at the beginning of your turn. And then Pete is going to come down and be a 3 cost inkable pirate, questing for 1 with a 5/2 stat line. So if you have Jolly Roger out, you move him into Jolly Roger, he's basically a 3 cost Maui. He's not attacking for 6, he's attacking for 5, but he's going to clear a lot of those big threats. And people may not necessarily see Pete coming. It's not a card people are generally aware of, not a card that's gotten a lot of press. I think with Jolly Roger, though, it is very good. Next up, we are on 3 Strength of a Raging Fire, a 3 cost inkable action song. This card we were playing 4 in the original list, ended up cutting down to 3 to make room for some of the other characters that we're playing in the list now. And this is going to deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of characters you have in play. That's another part of the reason we cut from 4 to 3. It is incredibly situational. If you draw into this after a board wipe, or when you only have 1 or 2 characters in play and you're in turn 4 or 5, it's not generally going to be doing anything that is going to be super helpful to you. Next up, our only 4-drop. This is a card that we played in the original list and then cut and then played again, and now we're on 2 of them. I think 2 is a good place to be with this card. I think it also can be fairly situational, but when it is good, it is good, and when it is not, it is not. And when it is not, thankfully at least it's inkable, so you can go ahead and get it in the inkwell, and that is going to be Donald Duck Buccaneer, a 4 cost inkable character, 3/4 stat line, questing for 1. But during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, your other characters get +1 lore this turn. Not other pirate characters, all of your other characters. So any of those non-pirate characters are still going to get the +1 lore from Donald. Next up in the 5 cost slot, a card that I think is really good, really kind of overlooked, and people are not necessarily always prepared to play around. They just kind of assume it's not going to have the final ability that it has because it's, I think, the only character in the entire game that has it. But that is going to be Captain Hook Thinking a Happy Thought, a 5 cost uninkable character, 2/5 stat line, questing for 1, shifting for 3. So this is one of those captains that can shift down on 3 that I was talking about. He does have Challenger +3, so when you're challenging in, he is going to essentially become a 5/5. The ability that I think makes this card really shine, though, is the ability Stolen Dust. Characters with cost 3 or less can't challenge this character at all. So Mim Foxes, Snakes, any of that early stuff that's going to be coming down and trying to be a board threat isn't going to be able to challenge Captain Hook. Pete, that 5/2 Pete I was talking about, can't challenge Captain Hook. So Captain Hook Thinking a Happy Thought, super good. Coming down on 3, very good. Next up in the 5 cost slot, we are on 3 Captain Hook Master Swordsman, so another Captain Hook card in this deck. A card I haven't seen a ton of people play, but a card that is fantastic with Jolly Roger. I have said it time and time again, a lot of these cards are contingent on having a Jolly Roger. That's why the deck is playing 4. But this card can still be good if it's not dealt with that first turn. Not having Rush can be rough for it, but it kind of almost works like Scar. It's a 5 cost inkable character, 5/4 stat line. So it's 2 cheaper and inkable than Scar is. And during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, ready this character, he can't quest for the rest of the turn, and he quests for 1, so that's not something you're really worried about. Characters named Peter Pan lose evasive and can't gain evasive. This is something that isn't really meta relevant right now, so you're not so much worried about that second ability, but that first ability where you're going to be able to kind of do Scar stuff, come down, move him into Jolly Roger, rush, kill, rush, kill, rush, kill, until that 4 willpower is knocked out, is very good. What makes him even better, and the reason we are playing a shift target for Mickey, is going to be our 4 Mickey Mouse Pirate Captain, a 5 cost inkable character for 4 stat line, so staying out of the range of those Medusas. Questing for 2, which is great. Good to see these cards questing for 2. Shifting for 3, so it's also coming down on that third turn onto your Mickey. It is a captain, so it is potentially going to prevent Smee from taking any damage at the end of that turn. And whenever this character quests, chosen pirate character gets +2 strength and gains. This character takes no damage from challenges this turn. So let's just hop back over to our Captain Hook here. This combo is crazy if you can get it on the board. If you go turn 3, play the shift target Mickey, play something else like a Smee. Turn 4, go ahead and shift Mickey, prevent your Smee from taking damage because now you have a captain in play, quest in with the Smee, challenge with the Smee, whatever you want to do. Maybe leave the Mickey ready if he's being threatened by something on your opponent's board, or they're playing Ruby and they're likely to also have rush. But if the board is clear, go ahead and get a quest in right there. Then going into turn 5, you have that Jolly Roger established already. If you don't establish it on that turn 3 or turn 4 when you shift the Mickey, either time you're going to have the ink available. Get the Jolly Roger down. Going into turn 5, you're going to go ahead and play Captain Hook Master Swordsman, quest in with Mickey, being able to give one of your pirate characters Challenger +2 and takes no damage. And then all of a sudden he is kind of even better than Scar. He's a 7/4 stat line, challenging as many times as he wants, and he's not taking any damage. Absolutely ridiculous. Then a card that has never really seen play until now in the Pirates deck, and I think has been really good, has been like a super overlooked card, is going to be Moana Born Leader, a 5 cost inkable 4/4 stat line. So again, staying out of range of those things like Medusa, staying out of range of Ice Block Brawl, really hard to Ice Block it down for a Sisu. She's going to be questing for 2 and shifting for 3, so another potential captain character to shift down on 3, keep those Smees from taking damage. And whenever this character quests while at a location, ready all other characters here, they can't quest for the rest of the turn. So you go like turn 1 Moana, turn 2 Captain Hook Jolly Roger, turn 3 shift this, move everybody in, quest with Captain Hook, quest with her, ready the hook so that he's not getting killed. Moana can be really good. She is also very good in the late game to close out games and keep your opponent from being able to get some favorable challenges against your characters. Last card in the 5-drop slot is going to be 3 A Whole New World, a 5 cost uninkable action song. Each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. We were on 4 of these in the original list, and I do still think 4 could be good, but you don't want to end up with 2 of these in your hand. Even though you're not drawing a lot in this deck, it happens more than I care to admit. You don't want to end up with one of these in a dock. You kind of want to have this by itself, and there are situations where it's just not good to play. Your opponent's already cleared out their hand, you have more cards in your hand than your opponent. Sometimes you don't necessarily want A Whole New World, but a lot of the time you do, which is why we still have 3. Each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards, so it's going to be Wheel of Fortune for Magic if you're familiar with that. Great way to kind of reset your hand when you have no cards left, but it is going to come at the risk of resetting your opponent's hand. That's why you always want to be able to sing it as opposed to hard casting it. Hard casting this card is never something you want to do unless you absolutely have to. If you're already in that position, chances of losing the game are high. And the very last card in the deck, we're on 2 Moana Kakamora Leader, a 7 cost inkable 6/5 stat line. So fantastic stat line on this card. Shifting for 5, questing for 1. So shift 5 is a little bit high. That's about as much ink as you're ever going to get with this deck, is like 5 or 6, because you don't have anything that costs more than that, and you're really only kind of looking to play 1 character a turn because you're not drawing a ton. When you play this character, you may move any number of your characters to the same location for free and gain 1 lore for each character you moved there. So if you're going into that turn 6 able to ink down, throw down a Jolly Roger, play Moana, move everybody in, and you're going to gain lore equal to the number of characters. Fantastic way to close out games, and the stat line is great. She only quests for 1, but super good stat line. I would say in the situation where you're shifting her down on like the 5 cost Moana, you would probably go ahead and quest the 2 with the Moana, then shift her after that. You'd probably go ahead and quest with all your guys, quest for 2 with the 5 cost Moana, ready everybody at a current location ideally, and then shift this Moana, move them to a different location, gain lore for all of the characters that were moved there. So the Moana is pretty crazy. That is the extent of the Pirates deck list. I think it's in a really super good spot. I've spent a lot of time tweaking this deck and tweaking it again. I think it is a potential challenger in the set 6 meta and really getting overlooked. And as a much added benefit, the entire deck list, if you're playing no foils, is $75. Incredibly cheap deck to build. It might be one of the cheapest competitive deck lists I've ever talked about. That being said, is there something you would play differently? Is there something you are playing differently? Are you playing totally different color pirates? Do you think Ruby Steel is the way to go, or do you think Emerald Steel Pirates is better? I think Ruby Steel is edging it out personally for me. But that being said, as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you feel so inclined. And when you see those toys, video games, and pirate decks featuring the awesome Moana off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.